Hello, world history students. Today is the last lecture in Unit 2. This is Unit 2, Part 6, all about Christianity and the fall of the Roman Empire. First of all, Christianity is based on the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, who was a Jewish prophet who was wandering around Palestine, today's Israel, around the year 30 CE or so. His message was that everyone has value, that people should be kind to one another, people should love each other, and that who you are really wasn't very important. God loved everyone equally. He does believe in monotheism, in one God, the Jewish God. He also, according to his followers, was a kind of son of God. It's kind of complicated how we get two gods out of one, or really even three gods out of one. But we consider Christianity to be a monotheistic faith, and that Jesus and his Father are kind of one in the same. Now, Christianity was really quite popular with lower members of society. They liked the idea that everybody should love each other, everyone should share things, that people should be kind to one another. In Roman society, it really was kind of a vicious social structure where the rich had everything and the poor had really nothing. And so thinking that God loved everyone equally and that people should share things was really quite popular with the poor and with women who really had very little power at this point in time. Christianity spread rapidly, even though it was illegal in the early Roman Empire. Because it was illegal, there was quite a bit of persecution of Christians off and on for about 300 years. One of the early persecutors was a Jewish person by the name of Paul of Tarsus. Paul had a conversion to Christianity. He became a Christian, and he was the one who really took Christianity away from being just a kind of Jewish belief or offshoot of the Jewish religion and bring it to people as a completely new faith. And he went to non-Jewish people in the Roman Empire and tried to convert them to Christianity and was really quite successful. As I said, Christians were persecuted off and on by the Romans. You can see in the image there at the bottom, Christians being thrown to the lions or a Christian crucified as Christ was. Jesus was actually executed by the Romans for kind of being a troublemaker after preaching the things that he was preaching. Well, the next bit of our story is really about how crisis started to weaken the Roman Empire. Pax Romana, if you remember, was this period of time when everything seemed to be going well. The economy was going well, things were well run, and so on. After Pax Romana, however, high taxes really started to affect the prosperity of the Roman Empire. Inflation was happening. The Roman coins were worth less, or prices were actually increasing as poor harvests happened, which of course, if there's just less food available, then the price is going to go up. There was a disruption in trade that occurred as well. And as part of that too, the soldiers became once again rather disloyal and less disciplined, kind of like what they had been at the end of the Republic, where they were just listening to generals and hoping that their generals could give them land and pay. Now, there was an emperor by the name of Diocletian around the year 300 or so, who decided that the Roman Empire was simply too big. It was too big for one person, one emperor, to control the entire thing. And so what he did was divide the empire into a western part and an eastern part. And then he was controlling the eastern part, the green part there on the map, and then he named a co-emperor to control the western part of the empire. This seemed to work out okay for a while. Each one of those emperors could concentrate on a smaller territory and stave off the fall of the Roman Empire for a while. But once Diocletian died, there was a kind of civil war that broke out between the rival East and West factions of the empire. Around 312, a new emperor by the name of Constantine took over and restored the idea of just one powerful ruler for the whole place. He was a person who realized that Christianity was becoming so popular that it would be good to stop persecuting Christians and actually adopt Christianity as a faith that was popular and that he could even be an adherent of. Another thing that he did was to move the capital away from Rome, which seemed to be maybe not so much the nicest part of the empire anymore. The eastern part seemed to be nicer. And he moved the capital to a place called Byzantium in 330 CE and renamed it Constantinople. It's today's Istanbul in the country of Turkey. Some of the causes of the fall of Rome were political and social and economic and military. Kind of repeating what I just told you, politically, the division of the empire probably wasn't very good for it. Even though Constantine brings it back together, it is a very large place, and it's really hard before there was very much technology to keep a big empire together. The generals who controlled various armies throughout the empire weren't always loyal and were sometimes ambitious, trying to seize power themselves. So that was the military interference in the politics. There was civil unrest. People were generally unhappy with their lot in life, and sometimes rebelled, or sometimes had riots and things like that. And it was really hard for the government to control that. Socially, there was a lot of disloyalty towards the idea of having one gigantic empire. There was a kind of lack of patriotism, lack of interest in keeping the empire together. Once again, people were kind of out for themselves, wanting to get rich themselves, or supporting a general who happened to be paying people money or giving them land. The divide between the rich and poor, which had always been a part of the Roman Empire, was getting worse even than it had been before, and before it was troublesome. Economically speaking, there were just random bad harvests, which of course made the price of food go higher. Problems trading from one part of the empire to another, as the roads started to not be repaired on a regular basis. People had a harder time getting products to various markets. There was high taxes and inflation happening, and once again, the gap between the rich and the poor could be something that you could talk about with economics as well. Militarily, there was a threat from Northern Europe that I'll talk about in just a minute, and once again, the decline of the loyalty of the citizen soldier. No longer really were Roman farmers the backbone of the Roman military. Oftentimes, they were hiring people who weren't even really Roman citizens or didn't really know anything about the Roman Empire to be used in their armies. But it all comes to crashing down in the end when a group of people from Central Asia moved into Eastern Europe. And as they moved, these are the Huns, as the Huns moved into Eastern Europe, then the people who were living in Eastern Europe, the so-called Germanic tribes people, they were fearful of these Huns, and so they moved into or across the border of the Roman Empire, seeking protection from these Huns, but at the same time, these Germanic barbarians, as the Romans called them, were attacking Roman civilization and attacking Romans and really making a mess of things. You can see that there's a whole bunch of different groups of people, Angles and Saxons and Franks and Goths, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and so on, who are moving throughout certainly the western part of the Roman Empire and making a mess of things, really breaking down civilization. In 476, they broke through the walls of Rome and took it over, and the last emperor dies in 476. Once that happens, we have the decline of Roman civilization further, at least in the West. But in the East, that Eastern Roman Empire with its capital in Constantinople continued to flourish. You can see that there are no Germanic barbarians who were successfully invading Constantinople or the Eastern Roman Empire. It continues for another 1,000 years, and we'll talk about that in a couple of units. It's a place called the Byzantine Empire. I hope that you got what you needed from the EQs, and go ahead and take your lecture check or your lecture quiz. Thanks. Bye-bye.